this is part of the unique value of online education, which is that it can be iterative and adaptive in a way that we know, in traditional universities is not the way it works, right? Somebody wants to start a new master's program. It's like 3 years of development and a lot of faculty and generally, more often than not, a lot of resistance.
Hello, welcome to EdTech Leaders. Today, I'm pleased to have Daphne Kis, the co-founder and CEO of WorldQuant University. WorldQuant University makes advanced, high-quality education accessible to students everywhere with completely free online academic offerings. Welcome, Daphne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tell us, what is the mission of WorldQuant University? A little more than what I said.
So the mission is to make quantitative and technical skills available to talented individuals wherever they might be. So our goal is to bring opportunity. I mean, if the mantra is the talent is equally distributed and opportunity is not, our mission is essentially to bring opportunity through learning to talented individuals around the world, wherever they may be. So our programs are pretty advanced. I mean, we have a master's program. We're in the midst of developing another master's that will be in applied AI that will be available in the coming months, as well as various labs in deep learning, data science, etc. And so again, qualified individuals around the world can avail themselves of these skills that are instructor-led, and our goal is to make that knowledge available to people for whom it can be transformative in terms of their life opportunities and their professional opportunities.
So your potential students are really anyone talented in the entire world.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we're not offering basic, K to 12
Yeah.
kind of stuff. It's advanced learning. So, I mean, and surely for our masters, people need to have a BA or the equivalent. They need to have, we teach our courses in English at this point. So need the language proficiency in order to fully take advantage of what's being offered. But yes, for those individuals, it's open to anyone who can pass quantitative, some simpler, some more complex, obviously for the masters. So we want people to be successful. So we want them to come in with the skills that they need to do so. And for those who don't pass initially the various tests that we have, depending on the skill level that we're teaching, we also offer resources so people can go back and develop those skills and come back and try again. So
Oh, that's great. And to be clear, you're fully accredited
fully
university.
accredited, fully accredited online university, accredited in the United States. And our programs are entirely free to learners.
And what's your delivery method?
So our programs are entirely online. They and are we have deadlines, etc., particularly in the masters, etc. But on the other hand, within that, it's self-paced in that the materials are readily available and sort of unfold as you progress. But there are 9 courses and a capstone in order to achieve the masters, for example, and they're taught sequentially and time-based, and you advance from one to the other. All of it's online. And then our instructors, who number about 20 around the world now, are teaching those courses, as it were, responding to students' queries and holding so-called office hours where questions and issues that are sort of clearly common to the group and our challenges are surfaced and addressed by those instructors who are, they're unbelievably committed. It's extraordinary.
So if someone, do your students go with a cohort? Is there a schedule like a regular university, or is it self-paced? Or
So students start with a cohort and then they get to know the people in their cohort. We have other resources like our alum network and then something we call the Piazza, which is sort of I guess would be, the sort of campus center in some physical analogy, where people get all sorts of resources and can share. So it sort of goes beyond the cohort and goes to the broader learning community that you are part of. But yes, they start as a cohort and they advance through the program, again, in this sequence that is taught, which takes ultimately about close to 2 years. And, what the assumption is that people are giving it, 20 to 30 hours a week, again, depending on where they're at. But again, it's very technologically driven, and that it's a big part of sort of the founding and the mission is the ability to leverage technology to make these resources and education available broadly to people.
Cool. So you have a master's in financial engineering.
Right, which is
And-
basically, so people understand, it's kind of the intersection of financial management, data science, and computer science. So obviously, as one progresses through the program, it gets increasingly mathematical, and but the applications for it are historically mostly in the investment community and financial services community, but is really applicable in many, many other industries. And we have students who some are in professions or are trying to change their professions, come from a huge range of backgrounds and are taking these skills and applying them across industries. So,
okay. And you have some other programs, or do you see applied data science lab, deep learning fundamentals, applied AI lab? Tell us
mhm.
about those.
so
Are those complete programs?
those are they're sort of certificate based,
Okay.
and more self-paced than the master's is, but again, with a lot of support and encouragement to move along. And they're also one thing that differentiates them from a pedagogical point of view is that they're very project oriented. So, you learn data science by solving problems. So the housing crisis in Mexico City, or water shortages in Cameroon, or whatever it might be. So you're learning the skills by giving context to the learning. So it's very problem solving based, which of course is both an opportunity to teach the skills as well as to help people become more critical thinkers, more disciplined about their approach, rather than sort of, seeing data as just numbers, right? Ultimately, I sort of believe that data science is like 21st century sociology, right? It's kind of it's to solve problems. It's a means to an end. Otherwise, it's just data. It's not data science, right? So the goal is to, again, and we have the opportunity, because we have such a diverse and global community, to draw on lots of different contexts and opportunities to address, economic development, agriculture, whatever it might be, and students have the opportunity to address those within their learning environment, and it makes things contextual, essentially.
Okay. And you are in how many countries? 140, is that correct?
Yes, it hovers somewhere between
Mhm.
140 and 150 at any given time. Obviously, we have concentrations, which is reflective of the global population, as it were. But yes, we have students as far as I know, for example, in every one of the 54 member countries of the African Union, etc. So, yeah, and everywhere else in the world.
That's
So.
how many students are we talking about?
There's about 35,000 learners on the platform.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
So how did you get involved? Take us back to what's your background and how did this start?
So my background is mostly in technology, not as a technologist, I promise you. My kids will tell you it's not about the technology, but it's about sort of the business intelligence around technology. And I had a career publishing a very prestigious monthly report on technology, had a successful conference business, investing in early stage companies as well. So that was my background. And over time, again, to me, technology is not the end, it's a means. And so I am and became increasingly interested in both health and education, where I would say certainly 10 years ago, technology was under leveraged in terms of opening new pathways and opportunities for learners, for better health, etc. So I had the opportunity, I was on the advisory board in the early sort of ideation stages of the university. And then our funder, Igor Tolchinsky, who himself was the beneficiary of the American dream, an immigrant where he's extremely talented and he had the opportunity to leverage his talent to build a very, very successful professional path for himself. And so, which I totally related to as well. And so I was given the opportunity to build this, and I like to build things. That's to me more interesting than giving advice, etc. Um, so to me, it was an opportunity to just kind of bring together things that I really cared about, which is, access and opportunity, leveraging technology, education, all of that. And so it was sort of a great assembly of all of that. Having said that, of course, in 2015, 16, online learning had a very different reputation than it does now. Not that it was good in any way, but arguably one of the few, the silver lining of COVID was that it forced a lot of technology development. It forced acceptance and adoption of taking advantage of online learning to actually make more accessible, legitimize, elevate learning opportunities for people where no geography was no longer a barrier. So it
So,
spoke to those interests, and again, that's to me that's the point. Is like we have this technology. How are we going to put it to work?
how is it working? How do you think where are we as a world today?
Um, well, obviously, I mean, the elephant in the room, of course, all these days about ed tech and pedagogy, et cetera, is AI and how that's going to play. I think that, and it's, the jury's out, arguably more than ever. Um, People need to, I mean, what is education at this point? It's the ability to think critically, to assess the resources that are coming to you, to have the means to evaluate their utility, their place in the big picture, and to be able, to sort of pull it apart almost and reconstruct it in a way that furthers learning and critical thinking. At some point, when in the early AI days, which really, what are we talking about? A couple of couple of years ago, but we talked early on that perhaps one of the ways to actually if you flip it and is to say, okay, you're using all these AI tools. So the way we're going to test people is by uh, giving them the assignment to find out what's wrong with the AI output that they got from having it try to do their work in a learning environment, right? Um, and that if you could figure out what was not accurate or what was questionable about the sources, it was kind of a, sorry to put it this way, but it was like a back-ended way
Hmm.
to get, you'd have to apply the kinds of skills that we're talking about in order to untether and tease it apart and be able to rebuild it in something that's meaningful and thoughtful. So I think the jury's out. I think the tools are better than ever, but it's still a challenge. I think it's not. We've certainly become more adapt at the technology. Everyone. I like to tell the story that when we were going through our accreditation process, um, which by now was 5 years ago, that our accreditors were like, well, wait a minute, like this Zoom thing, like how do people really, and is it really, are they really engaging? Are they really blah blah blah? And then literally 3 months later, we get a call from the accreditors going, could you help us figure out how to but, help our various institutions basically get online and create the interactions that now were really only possible online because of the shutdowns. So it's the world flipped and it was uh, opportunistic for us. And so I think those tools have gotten better and better. And I think people know, and certainly a generation is coming online now that online and growing that it's native to them, right? It's not. It's no. It's almost like gone away as an issue.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that it was only a few years ago that people were sort of adapting to the idea of using Zoom
Right.
uh, on a daily basis,
Right.
or
Yeah.
and now we're adapting to AI and figuring it out. And
Hmm.
Zoom is now an old thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's background, right? Where
Yeah,
it was in the foreground to the experience. Now it's again. It's like I don't even know what the analogy would be. It's just one of the many tools that you use to get through your day and to communicate and learn.
yeah.
So,
So
um,
let's talk about AI in terms of what you teach your students. I don't mean so much using AI, um, but does it feel like a moving target? Because AI in the
sure.
tech side is replacing so much
Hmm.
of what programmers or people in the tech space and data science used to be doing. How do you
Hmm.
adapt to that? And how does that change the value of what you teach students?
Um, well, I'm not sure about the value. I mean, I think the value of what's taught is not. That's still the underpinning of that. And
I
certainly,
think what I mean is, and how does it change what you teach students in terms of, yeah.
right. So again, I think some of it is a matter of teaching people how to use resources as much as anything, right? So I I think there's an irony to the idea that you're learning how to learn, right? We never questioned that. There was a time when you know, authorities of various sorts, because they were experts in their field, whatever, taught you what they taught you, and you took it as at face value. And that was the body of knowledge that you needed to have. I studied social history, for example, and so I spent most of my learning around that specifically around women's history, was to basically study historiography and methodology, all right, in a world in which we were changing what it was that made up the body of needed knowledge. And so similarly, I would say now there's sort of an analogy where you are teaching people how to think about the infinite amount of data and infinite amount of information that's available to them. So how do you take someone who doesn't have the background knowledge to critically think about it per se, right? It's like, wait a minute, I know whatever, I don't know. World War One was 1914 to 1918. Well, what if you never quite learned that to begin with? How do you sort of tease it apart in order to determine that there's sort of a logic to it? And a lot of that has to do, of course, ironically, again, with source material and where it comes from and how legitimate it is and how you research that almost. So, uh, people need to think that way about it in order to not take it at face value, that it must be the truth because, whatever, because Claude told me so, or whatever it might be. So I'm, by the way, it's a huge challenge, just so we're clear, all
Hmm.
right? But um, a lot of it, I mean, there's a reason why prompt engineering is a profession now. Arguably, it's a transition profession, and in 5 years you won't need it because the large language models will have asked and answered the question in any conceivable iteration, and so you won't need that. But at this point, you don't need software developers. You need prompt engineers, again, because in a sense, what they're doing is they're sort of building by their questions the building blocks of how of inquiry, as it were, right? Moving forward, which is sort of ironic, actually. And I would ironically, I also think you'd sort of go back to more traditional learning. I've been reading a lot of stuff where the way universities, et cetera, are dealing with this onslaught of AI and is to do in-class tests.
Yeah.
Somehow the physical world, I mean, it's quite ironic, right? The physical world is now sort of becomes the qualifier or whatever one might call it. And
Yeah.
certainly we do that online. I mean, we use authentication tools to make sure the person who's there is the person. So, in some worlds, what would you do? You'd authenticate people, and then you do what in the past was, an open textbook exam, right?
Right. Which is, yeah, coming back. The
Yes,
pencil,
it's coming back. That's right.
pen and paper composition notebooks are coming
Yes,
back.
that's right. I know. I've read that. There's like the sales of composition notebooks.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes. So, I mean, it is ironic that sometimes the simplest is what you need to go back to because you know, it's the way to make it most effective
Yeah.
and accurate in some sense.
So we're partly in this stage where we're doing a little babysitting of AI. We're
Yeah.
checking it. We're sort of checking sources. We're prompting. We're checking to see if people cheated on using AI. Is there a point when we don't do that anymore where on the positive side, because obviously people are worried, oh, if AI is doing all the thinking for us, what will we do? On the positive side, is there a world where then we begin to free us up to even think more deeply rather than less deeply?
Well, I mean, arguably, yes. And presumably, the great promise of AI is the ability to ask and ideally answer questions that you could have never posed before, right?
Mm.
That just the sheer scale of it opens up, and this is the greatest promise for that, of course, as we've seen, is in medicine, for example, all right, or in science, where just again, the limits of human calculation, etc., inhibit the ability of humans to open new areas of inquiry that just weren't available to them before. So it's almost, the paradigms are new paradigms that weren't there before that we couldn't conceive of. Again, because we weren't able to beyond just calculate them. We didn't have the benefit of things almost at scale colliding in a way that introduces new possibilities and new inquiry in a way that wasn't there before. Um, again, there's lots of social concerns and in all of that, and when people talk about disparity, the idea that there are people who will have developed the means to understand, etc., and those who won't, and is a the jury's out, no question about it. But on the other hand, people have access in a way that they never had before, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the other thing that will happen, of course, in all these, large language models. I mean, you read about this. I mean, OpenAI, they're hitting certain limits, right? Because you want your data to be also sufficiently curated, right? And within parameters. If I'm going to find out, I mean, I'm not even sure what example to give you, but some area of inquiry, let's say, for the sake of discussion, scientific, etc. I want the large language models that are based on, all the journal articles that have been written, professional journal. I don't want the New York Times interpretation of what it means to walk 10,000 steps versus 20,000. I want the original source material of where that was documented in a journal. So I think that what we're going to find is that there are sort of, again, within domains, large language models that are built to again, ironically, go back more to the material that actually expresses um, findings, etc., right? That we're going to rely on. So I think we'll see more and more of that, that it gets segmented in a way rather than all aggregated, right?
Hmm.
If I ask now as a lay person a medical question that I want an answer to, because I'm going to see the doctor, which of course is, every physician's worst. They all hate the internet because everybody
Mhm.
comes in knowing what they know, which
Mhm.
is or not true. But I would increasingly over time, if I have access to it, want to rely on the medical journals, not on what the Washington Post or Wired and the New York Times tell me, is how to, I don't know, address lower back pain, right? I want the findings to drive it. So,
Mm,
I think there's an opportunity for that, and I think as we talk about developing this new masters, for example, we talk about climate and climate resilience and agility and adaptation, right? You want the data to come from places that are going to really be thoughtful and be professional themselves in order to think critically about how you're going to pursue or address some of those challenges. But again, it's stage one. It's like we're all in nursery school in the scheme of things.
yeah. Let's talk about reach and the role of higher education. I mean, you're reaching incredible number of students who wouldn't otherwise necessarily have had access to a master's program.
Mhm.
Could you talk about some of the students and some of their backgrounds and journeys?
Sure. So, uh, they're as varied as the students that we have, honestly. I mean, what I think is true is that people, I would say that one thing that is true in this setting, in online learning, is that a common, something that's common to those who get through and really is their tenacity and their curiosity. And I think those increasingly are, when we talk about critical thinking, etc., the will to want to know, right? And to continue to be sort of it's sort of an adage from almost a generation ago of lifelong learners. Okay. And really, what does that mean? I mean, it means, are you someone who's curious and wants to know truths, whatever they might be, or are you someone who just sort of takes it passively? That's always been true about education. It's always been true about learning, right? There are people who have the tenacity and the will to, and always want to know more. I would say that is across the board a common characteristic of our students. It's a choice. Now, having said that, there are certainly lots of people who check in, do it, have the proficiency, start doing it, and then go, this is not right for me. All right. Which again is also in and of itself is a huge opportunity, right? Because that's not usually you still have to sign up for the course and you've paid for it. And there's just all sorts of inhibitions before you have the opportunity to assess its value to you. So that in and of itself is an innovation. And it's a self-selecting process, right? Where so that's what I would say across the board. What we have statistically, certainly in these skills, disproportionate men versus women, something that since day one we try to address. I interestingly, in the U.S. we have a very sort of we need to teach STEM and so on. These are areas that I think around education are very highly valued in other parts of the world. You have to convince a person who's going to pay for your education that you want to get a degree in literature. There's much more STEM learning, whether it's in the, in certainly in the Arab world, that's true. In other places, there's just a historical tradition of what's traditionally STEM skills being highly valued. And so I think that kind of comes into play here and is part of why we have such a global audience. All right, apart from the fact that it's in English and you need to know how to speak English. But so those are all common characteristics. People come, I mean, they range in age from, you have to, again, in the master's, you have to have a bachelor's, so you're probably not younger than 2021. And, we've had 80-year-olds, all right, who are doing it for the heck of it. So, but most people, they're looking to upskill or to change careers. They come from every possible area that you can imagine. Certainly, about where I don't know the number this week, but it's in around 40% come from having studied business or finance or something that again is or applied physics or things that are traditionally sort of quantitative and analytic in nature. But people coming from education, from hospitality, from just all incredible range of of sort of pre-existing or backgrounds and skills. They vary certainly socioeconomically as well. I mean, again, less so now because of internet penetration, but I can tell you not that long ago of people who were like, they have no my village has no internet connection. I walk to my employer, or I stay late, or I do whatever because I need access in order to be able to take the coursework and do it. And again, this is complicated information, so you want some stable environment in which to be learning it. So
Mhm.
again, every type of person in every corner of the world. But I do think that, again, in these kinds of situations, it's a self-selection that happens of
Mhm.
people who are tenacious, curious, and again, that sort of lifelong learning adage is very much in play here.
Wonderful. Let's
Yeah.
talk about sort of growth. You're a nonprofit, correct?
Uh-huh.
You're nonprofit, and you have a funder. Let's talk about funding and where funding and growth goals.
Right. So the university aspires to have by 2027, end of, close to 100,000 learners on the platform. The technology is not an inhibition at this point. I think we keep the offerings keep growing, and so that fits more different types of approaches. And some of what's being developed now in this master's and in this applied AI master's, there's a sort of common set of core skills. And then for the latter courses, it forks where there are some people who take the more quantitative mathematical approach to get to their degree, and others are sort of more policy oriented, where that those quantitative skills are more in the background to facilitate policy, social change, whatever it might be, kinds of advancements. So we're getting sort of more nuanced in that than we might have been historically in terms of distinguishing the sort of, what tends to be kind of a bifurcation that happens over time. So that's the aspiration. In terms of funding, we've had a very patient and generous funder who really understands what's at work here. Um, the university is working very hard right now and has a whole bunch of partnerships and academic partnerships across the globe that are being nurtured and developed. And some of those are to develop custom programs for universities to leverage the technology that we've built and the approach, et cetera, and to work with partners that way, which is a way to effectively grow the student body, right? You find select partners who already have captured an audience and or a community of learners. So that's one very cost effective way to do it. And then others who are using us or asking us to build more customized curriculum, et cetera, for which they are paying. But the goal is always for it to remain free to the learners. That is sort of at the center. And again, like to think that we have now, we're old in that we have experience and in how this works and can share that with partners, whether it's in the commercial corporate world or it's in the academic arena, et cetera. And, it's a very broad canvas. So, but that's the goal now, is to find additional support. And it's coming in different ways that are in development at this moment. So,
Like corporate
yeah,
partnerships and
exactly.
donors and
Donors, et
yeah.
cetera, right? And again, I like to say, it's been very patient capital in what has essentially been a startup in a way, and that's how we approached it, right? To be agile and flexible, and our students were, pioneers as well, and kind of we used people early on and still do, sort of in exchange for this free education, give us lots of feedback, all right? So that we can iterate and we can improve and we can make increasingly relevant and whatever it might be that's needed. But again, this is part of the unique value of online education, which is that it can be iterative and adaptive in a way that we know, in traditional universities is not the way it works, right? Somebody wants to start a new master's program. it's like 3 years of development and a lot of faculty and a lot of, and a lot, generally, more often than not, a lot of resistance, right? People are kind of want to maintain their turf in their domains and etc. And so I think one of the great opportunities in an online learning environment like this is that we have a community of instructors and learners who, again, to the earlier point, understand it's a moving target. And so we're
Mm.
constantly adapting and updating curricula to reflect those changing, demands of the marketplace, of industry, of what's expected of people in terms of when they go out and look for a job. So it's one of the great
Right.
virtues of online learning,
Yeah.
actually. Mhm.
And then you get feedback from your graduates, alumni,
That's right.
when
That's
they
right.
go to work in industry of what,
Right.
how you might change things, what was useful.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So in
forth.
general, the curriculum has been built, and this was true in the master's early on, was built kind of, it was almost like we reverse engineered. We
Mm,
saw what the demands of industry were and then built the masters. And again, it's a back and forth. You keep
mm,
iterating on both sides to understand. But that was our goal initially, was to see what is the state of the industry, to be prescient in terms of what was coming and integrate that into the curricular development and then be open to iterating as things change.
mm,
So, you know, and again, I think part of what we see in most traditional higher education is, when it comes to AI, it's sort of like trying to close the box. And if they can't, it's like deer in the headlights, right?
mm,
Because there's a sort of native resistance to change
right.
rather than an embracing that it's always going to iterate.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do people find out about you? WQU,
www.wqu.edu. Yeah.
WQU.edu.
Right.
Check it out. Learn about WorldQuant University
Yeah.
and subscribe to this channel as well.
Excellent.
And thank you so much, Daphne
Thank
Kis.
you. Thank you. Be well.